So one of the concerns that people have when they set up a perfSONAR toolkit to perform a heavyweight bandwidth test is if a lot of other sites will start testing against you and consuming some of those scarce bandwidth resources. There are ways that you can limit how many people can test against you, how long of a test you allow, and what sorts of bandwidth limitations you can invoke on anybody who performs a test against you using a policy language that exists within the BWCTL daemon. So we're going to demonstrate what this policy file looks like and make a couple of small changes. Different sites can use these controls to either allow a certain class of users to do more testing or block others from doing testing at all. So we're on a freshly installed perfSONAR toolkit instance. This is what you would find if you installed this from scratch and haven't made any modifications. There is a file within the directory system that controls the BWCTL limitations. It's called the BWCTL Limits File. We're going to open this in an editor. Within this file, it's structured as a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is meant to allow us to have different classes of permissions for different possible users. So we're going to walk through each piece of this file right now. At the top, we have what's called the root class. This is all of the permissions are going to be derived from this. So we can think of this as the most permissive classification that we would create. So it has a name. It's just simply called root. And then we have a couple of directives. If somebody's going to run a UDP test against us, for example, we've set the limitation to be a bandwidth value of 900 megabits per second. So if somebody were to invoke a test and they had the permission to use UDP against us, the maximum bandwidth that they'd be able to utilize would be 900. We can make this smaller, we can make this larger if we wanted to. The maximum length of a test that anybody can run, whether it be TCP or UDP, is set to be 60 seconds. We can make this smaller or larger if we wanted to as well. By default, we're allowing UDP and TCP tests for any class of user that is classified into the root. We're also allowing what's called open mode. This means we're not going to allow, or we're not going to force authentication for any of the clients that connect to us. Any client can come and perform the test. And we're also allowing a maximum time error, which means the amount of time that NTP can be skewed from true time to be 20 milliseconds. We have a couple of other classes as well in here. The next one we'll notice is called the regular class. The regular class has a parent of root, but instead of it inheriting all of root's permissions, it's changing one of them. So it's turning off UDP testing. So it has all the same permissions as the root stanza, except we don't allow UDP. Lastly, we have the jail, which is turning off all permissions. This is how you would ban a host from testing against you. So for example, it sets the bandwidth to be 1 bit. It sets the duration to be 1 second. It turns off TCP and UDP testing. We would put any host that was performing any bad things against us in our log files into this classification so that they can no longer make tests to us. Let's say we wanted to add a new testing class. Let's say that the testing class that we want to add in has a shorter duration. We can start by using the regular class. We can call it something different. Let's call it short. And we can keep this allow UDP off, but we're going to change the duration parameter. So instead of it allowing a 60-second test, we'll set the maximum to be 30 seconds. So now we have a new class that we can add in users. So what does the stanzas look like where we specify which users can use our host right here? At the bottom, we've assigned our default, meaning any host that approaches this, our host, is going to be classified into that regular category. We also have a couple of other assignments here. We have bandwidth networks. In this case, we're just using a 172 address class. They've been assigned into the jail. We also have some trusted hosts. We have a specific /32 and a specific /128 for our local host. This means that the local host can invoke tests against itself if it wanted to. Now, if we wanted to assign a new classification of hosts to use that short that we just made, we would do a similar sort of assignment. We would assign net. In this case, we're going to assign this /16 for our collaborators at the University of Oregon, and we're going to assign them into the short classification. So you can use this method to assign large classes, class A, class B, class C. You can also use this to assign specific hosts using a /32. Once you make any changes to this file, you always have to restart the BWCTL daemon. If there were any errors in the limits file, it would tell you, and you'd have to go back and fix those errors. So using these controls, we can limit which classes of user are allowed to execute tests against our host, and we can enforce some limitations to protect our bandwidth resources.